I'm Philip Stoughton. I'm at the Cybercrime Conference here in Earls Court, London, part of the IGE 2009 event. I'm joined by Simon Dilloway. Simon, thank you very much for joining me. You just gave a really interesting presentation on money laundering and its relationship to terrorism. It seems the guys doing the money laundering, the bad guys, are getting really smart. Are they getting smarter faster than us, or are we keeping pace with them?
I think by their very nature they are getting smarter faster. I think it's more a question of ingenuity and identifying all the changes that are made with the new regulations and the new regimes that companies put in to try and defeat them. They're able to move faster because they're not bound by legislation, they're not bound by budgetary constraints, or bound even by country boundaries. They can think of something else and go to the next step far faster than anybody can possibly respond to it. But, so people need to be vigilant to keep up with that.
And it seems that these kinds of people are almost enjoy the challenge of it. It's a challenge to them to find different ways, different hacks, different processes. What kind of people are they that are involved in those kind of activities?
Well, I couldn't say specifically in terms of cybercrime, but in general, money launderers, I mean, they are professionals. The necessity is the mother of invention, and they have money that they have to launder on behalf of themselves or other clients, and so they need to avoid getting caught, because obviously the penalties are very steep. So I think it's that drives it. So I mean, they're traditionally, I mean, it's been people with perhaps with accountancy experience, or people with knowledge of the markets, as well as opportunists as well.
And I guess now it's people with knowledge of the internet and how that works, and there's a huge amount of that knowledge and understanding available to those people.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I don't think anybody can dispute that the internet has been a major source of the growth in fraud. There's all sorts of issues in terms of people's gullibility and things that arrive in their inboxes, and their willingness to actually accept and they think there's something for nothing when that's not the case.
Well, it's the opportunist thing, and the opportunist thing perhaps becomes more extreme during times of crisis, when the markets, when the jobs market's tough, and people become a little bit more vulnerable, perhaps.
Absolutely, that's the case. So if you are under pressure, then obviously you'll look at things perhaps seem more attractive than they would have done if you were in the cold light of day and you're not under pressure.
Yeah, and these things do come into your inbox several times.
That's right, and they're also coming. The other thing, of course, is the fact that it's it can be. It's not always, not nowadays, but it can be some guy in his bedroom doing it, and it's very difficult to trace and to track these people down.
I was interested in the way you were defining dirty money in terms of where it sits in the transaction, because there's almost a difference there between laundering money from crime that you want to clean and money that is perhaps starts clean and becomes dirty money by the intent that it's being used, and it's just being shifted around for terrorist purposes. Can you just explain what you meant by that difference?
Yeah, certainly. When we're talking about traditional laundered money, that money is always the proceeds of crime. Otherwise it wouldn't need laundering. So it's dirty from the moment it's taken out of your pocket or somebody else's bank account. So that's the difficulty of the person who then has that money is accounting for it. So they need to do something with it to make it get as far away from them as possible, so they can actually use it for what they're doing without people realising it's the proceeds of crime. When it comes to terrorist funding, certainly a sizable proportion actually comes from the proceeds of crime, so the same things apply. But terrorist funding, it can also be looked at as terrorist resourcing. It doesn't have to be money. It can be goods, and it can be clothes, it can be all sorts of things, and they need to be moved around from place to place. But of course, if it's not stolen money, if it's somebody's charitable donation, or if it's just a gift, or if it's just some clothes, of course nobody's going to suspect anything, because it's not actually dirty. It's dirty because that person who's moving it around knows that it's going to be used for terrorist purposes. And it's not until perhaps it gets to a stage where it's being transferred to, say, an area of conflict, going into Pakistan or going into Iraq, then of course then that's where the danger lies for that sort of property. Yeah,
so it's the trail of the money and the position in that trail that makes it clean or dirty. And you gave an interesting example, which kind of underlines what you said, which was the July 7th bombers, and the fact that they were funded from a simple unsecured bank loan. So obviously, that's money that is quite clean when it comes out of that bank account, and it's difficult to criticise the bank in question.
There's no way you could have criticised the bank, because it was a standard transaction they do, thousands of times a year.
And it was a relatively small amount. So, how can that kind of thing be monitored?
Well, that sort of thing can only be monitored really by cooperation between the financial institutions and the intelligence and security services, and a flow of information between the two at the appropriate level, vetted level, so that people who are being looked at can the police and the intelligence service can get the information that's required in order to form an opinion as to whether or not that money might be dirty, and take it from there.
Yeah. Okay. And just continuing slightly with that example, you also mentioned that those seven bombers were members of casinos, because obviously once one person's taken that money out, that has to be distributed to various different parties. That was the kind of method they were using to move funds around.
I can't confirm whether they used those methods.
Right.
All I can confirm is they were members. They were members.
Yeah.
So it begs the question why. Why that is particularly given the profile of the people who would not normally expected to be casino members.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And we see more and more online activity, more and more what I consider to be curious online activity, the Facebook phenomenon, things like Second Life, for example. You mentioned Second Life in your presentation. Those are environments where money is being transacted, or transactions are occurring even if they're in a different currency. There must be constant new opportunities for these people to move their money around.
Absolutely. The challenge is to actually identify these sort of possibilities as they are brought into inception. There's nobody suggesting that Second Life is a bad thing, but it's vulnerable, and I'm very much of the opinion that whether it be new payment methods or telephone banking or all sorts of things, there should be very serious consideration given to the planning stage, to just trying to sort of do a war game with it and try and find out if that how it could be abused, because it would be very easy to abuse for example, a virtual world scenario.
Well, you have a curious situation there where you have an organisation that's developed a product that has a very specific purposes, which clearly isn't the movement of funds for terrorism, becomes exploited for that, and it becomes a curious situation. Who then has that responsibility? Who then can afford to or has to drive the systems that can stop that? So I guess that becomes a challenge with government, with software organisations.
That's the case when you're talking about the internet phenomenon, which is global, and who polices it. I mean, I think in those cases, and I must stress again, there's no evidence to suggest there's terrorist financing on with Second Life. I'm just saying there's a possibility of it happening. But I think the responsibility must rest then with anybody who's actually providing a service where money can be moved. Should look at the processes involved and whether or not it can be. There is no regulation on what moves around, so perhaps there should be, and to be making sure that when you think about these things, you put processes in place to make sure that do your best actually, at least address the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Simon, it sounds like there are a whole bunch of new challenges out there that I'm sure you as an organisation will be keeping us aware of. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for speaking to me, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.